Imposter syndrome is the psychological experience of feeling like a fake or a phony despite any genuine success that you have achieved. It can show up in the context of work, relationships, friendships, or just overall. It's a very common and frustrating phenomenon because it holds us back from self confidence that we have earned and deserve to feel. You might have imposter syndrome if you feel or find yourself consistently experiencing self doubt, even in areas where you actually excel. Imposter syndrome may feel like nervousness, accompanied by the belief that you will be found out, and it may also manifest as negative self talk. Symptoms of anxiety and depression often accompany imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is not a diagnosable mental illness. The term is usually narrowly applied to intelligence and achievement, although it has also links to perfectionism and the social context. Psychologists Susanna Imes and Pauline Rose Clance first used this term in the 1970s. The irony is that the people with imposter syndrome are often highly accomplished, impressive individuals. On the outside, there is no apparent reason for them to feel like an imposter, and yet they do. This is what makes it such a challenging psychological phenomenon that needs to be unpacked. Not only can imposter syndrome affect your internal feelings about your work or self worth, but it can also actually affect the way you approach projects, relationships, or any other areas in your life in which you are feeling insecure. Based on research by psychologists, imposter syndrome can be broken down into five basic types. The first type is the perfectionist. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that unless you were absolutely perfect, you could have done better. You feel like an imposter because your perfectionistic traits make you believe that you are not as good as others might think you are. Second type is the expert. The expert feels like an imposter because they don't know everything there is to know about a particular subject or topic, or they haven't mastered every step in the process. Because there is more for them to learn, they don't feel as if they have reached the rank of an expert. The third is the natural genius. In this type of imposter syndrome, you may feel like a fraud simply because you don't believe that you are naturally intelligent or competent. If you don't get something right the first time around, or it takes you longer to master a skill, you feel like an imposter. The fourth type is the soloist. It's also possible to feel like an imposter if you had to ask for help to reach a certain level or status. Since you couldn't get there on your own, you question your competence or abilities. And the fifth type is the super person. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that you must be the hardest worker or reach the highest levels of achievement possible, and if you don't, you feel like you are a fraud. Imposter syndrome is a very serious psychological phenomenon. The common characteristics are an inability to realistically assess your competence and skills. Many a times you attribute your success to external factors. You berate your own performance. You have this fear that you won't live up to your own expectations. You have a self doubt. You set very challenging goals and feel disappointed when you fall short. What is the impact of imposter syndrome? For some people, imposter syndrome can fuel motivation to achieve, but this comes at the cost of experiencing constant anxiety. You might over prepare or work so much harder than necessary to make sure nobody finds out that you are a fraud. Actually, you are not a fraud, but you feel that you have this fear. This anxiety worsens and may lead to depression. This sets up a vicious cycle in which you think that only reason you survived that class presentation or that project was that you stayed up all night rehearsing, or you are the only reason that you got through the party or family gathering was that you memorized details about all the guests, so you would always have ideas for small talk. The problem with imposter syndrome is that experience of doing well at something does not change your belief about yourself. The thought still nags in your head: what gives me the right to be here? The more you accomplish, the more you feel like a fraud. It's as though you can't internalize your experiences of success. There are many real life examples of imposter syndrome. You have been working in an office or in a project for a couple of months, you perform well in your school, you perform well in your work, and yet you feel like you don't deserve it. This is common example of imposter syndrome. Wrong parenting styles, wrong family upbringing, unhealthy environment at work or school, or your own personality can be the reasons for imposter syndrome. Many a times, social anxiety also causes imposter syndrome. How to cope with imposter syndrome? To get past imposter syndrome, it helps to start asking yourself some hard questions. What core beliefs do I hold about myself? Do I believe I am worthy of love? Must I be perfect for others to approve me? To move past these feelings, you need to become comfortable confronting some of the deeply ingrained beliefs you hold about yourself. You need to share your feelings, talk to other people, and come to terms with your irrational beliefs. You need to focus on others. If you see someone who seems awkward or alone, you need to ask them the question to bring them into your group. You need to assess your own abilities. You need to take baby steps towards solving this problem and question your thoughts. You need to, most importantly, stop comparing yourself to others. Restricting the use of social media can help it. You need to stop fighting your feelings and refuse to let it hold you back. These are some of the ways you can deal with imposter syndrome. Thank you so much for listening.